ورسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So inshallah we start from باب آداب دخول الخلاء. So the previous one on the page 26 we went through the adab and the etiquettes of when we wake up and the du'as and the kalimat we should recite, the words we should recite when we wake up. On this page now, the next chapter, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala places here is Babu Adabi Dukhul al-Khala, the chapter regarding the etiquettes and the manners with which we should enter the lavatory or the bathroom as well. So, Islam has given us, and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ has given us guidelines for every single step of our life. Why? Because the one who has appointed the Sharia for us, page number 28 inshallah. The one who has appointed the Sharia for us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what we need and what we don't need. How we should, what's best for us in terms of our requirements as well. What's best for us in regards to our health. What's best for us in regards to our livelihood and so on. So here, Imam Ghazali will be covering all aspects of our daily routine. He says, Bismillah, فَإِذَا قَصَدْتَ بَيْتَ الْمَاءِ بِقَضَاءِ الْحَاجَةِ. He says, when you made the intention to, or you decided that you need to go to the bathroom, right? That you decided that you need to go to the bathroom, he says, فَقَدِّمْ فِي الدُّخُولِ. So, رِجْلَكَ الْيُسْرَى. So enter the bathroom with your left foot. So that's one of the adab of entering the bathroom, is to enter with your left foot. And then he says, al-khuruj, and the exiting. How would you exit the bathroom? He says, rijlaka yumna, and you lead with your left foot. And then he says, وَلَا تَسْتَصْحِبْ شَيْئًا عَلَى اسم الله تعالى واسم رسول الله وَلَا تَدْخُلْ حَاسِرَ الرَّأْسِ وَلَا حَافِ الْقَدَمَيْنِ. So he mentions here now the adab of entry. He says, do not take inside anything that has one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And do not enter with a bare head or bare feet. This is one of the adab of going to the bathroom. The first thing he mentions here, don't enter the bathroom with something that says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name on it. Okay, so it could be a piece of cloth that we have, it could be a type of hat that we're wearing that has the name of Allah, or any religious symbol that we're wearing, a badge, it could be, or a ring. Sometimes you get rings that say Allah, Rasul, Muhammad, right? So on there, those things should be removed once entering the lavatory or the bathroom. And it doesn't only restrict it here to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but more broadly speaking, it also means anything which has the kalimah, anything which has the kalamullah and the Quran, anything, so anything religious you could say in that aspect, even in the form of writing. And then he mentioned two other etiquettes. One is going to the bathroom, covering your head. It is a sunnah to cover your head when going to the lavatory, to the bathroom. These days, it's become a culture that people say, it's not a sunnah, wearing a hat, for example. So they use this term, why? It was culture to wear a hat, so you don't need to wear a hat. It was culture to wear imamah, so you don't need to wear an imamah. But if you logically think about it, and you actually ponder about it, why would the ulama of hadith, right, make chapters on describing the imamah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, describing the turban of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala, he describes the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's imamah sharif, the turban that he wore sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if they're talking about the turban and making chapters in their hadith books regarding it, then it must be a part of the sunnah, that hence they are mentioning it under the chapters of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So generally covering your head in salah, out of salah, is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now here he mentioned that when you go to the toilet, ulama have also mentioned that it's a sunnah to cover your hair, and mustahab on that level. You're not sinful if you don't, but it's still mustahab, desirable and advised by the ulama. It comes under the broader aspect of being a sunnah of going to the bathroom. What's the wisdom behind it? Allah knows best. Right? But there's some wisdoms ulama have mentioned, like for example, the hair, they pick up smells easily. So hence when you're covering your hair, then the smell in the bathroom, it won't get stuck to your hair. Right? And so that's one of the reasons the ulama have mentioned. But there are other reasons which have also been mentioned under this as well. And the second thing is, which is, you could say, more important from us, one aspect is, don't go to the bathroom without any slippers on. That's the masjid or the home or anywhere. Anyone who does that is just unhygienic. Not Islamically speaking, just generally as a human being, it's just unhygienic to be in a bathroom with no shoes or no footwear on. Why? Especially, for example, when you flush the toilet, particles of the water that's been splashed in the toilet, just because the impurity goes down the drain, the particles that are splashing, they still go on the floor around the toilet. Okay, so it's important that slippers are worn inside the bathroom, and this is a must. Okay, so this comes under adab of, especially sometimes people have long jeans on and they're dragging under the heels, and then they're getting them all wet in the bathroom. This generally speaking, even though the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, generally when people say something is sunnah, how I think that the best way to understand it, it's when someone says this thing is sunnah. My understanding, what comes to my mind is putting the maqam of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in mind. When the ulama describe him, what do they say? He's the perfect, highest point and the most perfect human being sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that means when they say something is a sunnah, it's trying to say this is the best way a human should do it. Simple. That's how it should be our understanding. This is the best way we should do something. So if someone says it's sunnah to cover your hair when you go bathroom, the best way to go to the bathroom is to cover your hair. It's sunnah to wear shoes in the bathroom or slippers, footwear basically. Then it's the best way to enter a bathroom with the shoes up. Why? Because it's a sunnah. And that should be our reasoning. We shouldn't need no scientific proofs. If it's mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, that is our science. That is our, the top research that you can come up with. Why? Because it's Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His ilm, his knowledge, his understanding, his wisdom is far greater than any science development that we're going to, even human beings that we're going to achieve, never mind what we've achieved so far. Then he mentions, before entering the lavatory, say the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek refuge in Allah from the filth and impurity, and from the defiled one who defiles, say shaitan the accursed. And upon leaving the lavatory, say, your forgiveness, Allah, all praise is the one who takes from me what harms me and leaves me with what benefits me. So inshallah we'll continue with this after the salah. There's been a short time before the namaz, but inshallah we'll continue with this, and then we'll move on to the fiqh and aqidah after the salah inshallah. If you did buy the books last week, give the money to Ismail inshallah. He also took the books. I need the responsibility to chase the speed up. So here we just left off from the dua we should recite when we enter the lavatory and the dua to leave the lavatory. وقل عند الدخول بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الرجس النجس الخبيث المخبث الشيطان الرجيم. This is similar to the one we normally, or there's a different variation out of the It's got some of those words but in a different form. Yes, it says al-khabith al-mukhbith. It refers to the same thing really. That this is here the forms which are used, they are describing shaitan. Because he's rajim, that's what they are here. And the last was ash-shaytan rajimi. So these are his sifats that basically we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from shaitan, the impure, and it says here the impure, the defiled one who defiles, and shaitan, the accursed. And then when you leave the lavatory, because the toilet is supposed to be a place of impurity. These days, unfortunately, people be sitting at the toilet, going through, back in the days, people used to, like, when I was young, Muslims especially used to make a joke, a mockery of the people in the West, that they read the newspaper on the toilet. I don't know if you remember those days, right? When the people in the West, Muslims used to laugh and say, check these, I don't want to use racist words, but check these white people, they read newspaper on the toilet. Who does that? Yeah? But now, even the Muslims are doing the same with the newspaper. Why? You just sit on the toilets and scrolling. And I did tell you, it went off one of these people that when his grandmother thought that he had died in the toilet. Yeah? Why? Because he just sit in the toilet, blasting music, had his earphones in. So his family thought that he had passed away in the toilet, so they tried to get him through the window, and they find out that he's inside here, he just gets earpods on, and he's just chilling in the toilet basically. But as Muslims, and especially on the phone, what happens? What's the first thing he mentioned? Don't take religious things inside. Right? What happens as soon as you're on Facebook or something religious pops up? Because normally because of the algorithms, it's whatever you check, those partially that's what you're fed. And all of us, get some Islamic things coming to us from friends, family and stuff. So when we check them a few times, the algorithm picks that up. So when you go to Facebook, then the adverts will be religious sometimes. You go to Snapchat, Instagram, the adverts might be religious. Or they might be haram, depending on how we utilize our time. But either way, both things are not permissible for a believer. So we need to keep that in mind, and no mobile phones in the toilet, there's no emergency in there. Yeah? I'm sure everyone knows. I was speaking to a friend, you could say, and he's like, my brother watches movies on the toilet, or you can hear a full movie outside, full blast. It's not like he has earphones in, he just sits on the toilet and starts watching like Netflix or something. And so, unfortunately, it's the Muslims that do that as well. So, it's a bit, you're laughing because you find it ridiculous, but I bet everyone knows someone who uses the phone or watches random clips on the phone on the toilet. But that shouldn't be the case. Okay? It kills spirituality as well. It's not only about if it makes sense or if it's logically something that we should be doing or not. First thing, sitting on the toilet for a long period of time, then that can cause harm to our body as well. Yeah, so sitting on the toilet for long periods of time is not good for our organs as well. And then, sitting on the toilet for long periods of time, for example, that can cause an illness where you get blood coming out of your private parts. Why? Because you sit on the side of the toilet for so long, and then obviously it can cause some damage. Right? You just go there, you do your thing, and then you straight out, and that should be, and it's an impure, nasty place basically. And why should a believer find himself wasting his time sitting on the toilet basically sitting on top of filth. Literally, that's what we're doing, right? Sitting on top of filth and just chilling on our mobile phones. You know, just do your business, get out, and then chill on your phone on your comfortable sofa instead of on those toilets. Then once you leave, then you do shukr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically. He says, Ghufranak. Oh Allah, we seek your forgiveness. Right? Alhamdulillah alladhi adhaba anni ma yu'dhini wa abqa alayya ma yanfa'uni. There's different variations to this, but this one, this dua is, all praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alladhi adhaba anni, the one who removed from me, ma yu'dhini, that which will cause us harm. So you know those people who are constipated, for example, then that constipation is considered illness, isn't it? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing us a favor that He gives us food that tastes nice, and that same food, if it stays long enough in our stomach, will make us upset, make our stomach upset, causes illnesses. So each time we go to the toilet, it's a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a blessing from Allah as well, just using the toilet as well. Because what happens? The extra stuff comes out, but those things which are beneficial for us, they remain within our body. Right? So here, that's what the dua refers to. That you're thanking Allah. Oh Allah, you removed the harmful things from me, but you left inside me those things which are beneficial for me. And this is the beauty and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So eating is a blessing, and getting rid of the stuff is also a blessing. So every aspect of our existence, everything we do, everything we experience is, there's also wisdom behind that, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he mentions, وَيَنْبَغِي أَن تُعِدَّ النَّمْلَ قبل قضاء الحاجة. Then he says you should make ready cleaning materials such as toilet paper and water before you actually begin to relieve yourself. So this is something important as well. Why? Because it's hygiene. You know, in the West is a culture that you use those urinals, I think they're called, right? You stand up and you know, unfortunately they've got those on Hajj as well. In Mina they had them, right? So people are saying pictures of Hajj and Mina, and they have those urinals. First thing, it baffles me. I don't know how they would use it at Ihram. It just doesn't make sense. And then the second thing, it's against adab. Again, it's against manners. Why? Because first thing, when you use the urinals, you're exposing yourself most likely in front of other people because they are made in public places. They don't be in a cubicle. And second thing, it causes the water to splash back. Even though some particles you might see with your eye, but the smaller ones you don't see with your eye. And knowingly a Muslim shouldn't find himself in that scenario, in that situation. So he mentions here that a believer should be fully ready before he even gets into the toilet. Before he starts using the toilet, he should, in what we have, the lota, right? Or there's, non-Muslims normally say, why do Muslims have a jug in the toilet, right? But it's a teapot in the toilet, it looks like a teapot. So normally, but it's important that you get your things ready beforehand. Make sure there's toilet paper there, make sure you've got your water ready, and then so that after you relieve yourself, then you can purify yourself as soon as possible. That's the purpose behind it. So you shouldn't be wearing any clothes while your body's still impure, hence obviously the clothes will become impure as well. And then he mentions here, do not wash yourself with water in the same place where you relieve yourself. This, they're given a footnote number 2 for this, but the reason behind this is why, because when the water you're doing istinja with, it's most likely going to splash back. So when you're doing istinja, for example, and the water you're using to clean yourself, it's going to bounce back off the surface that it's where the impurity is. So hence what will happen, then you'll be splattered with even small fragments of impurity that will go on your clothes. So you should take heed of this as well. Another thing, just as a side note, in terms of hygiene, I just want to mention that, I know someone who got infected in the private parts because they would sit on the toilet and they would flush the toilet all the time while sitting on the toilet. They wanted to obviously get rid of the impurity, their intention is clean. But what would happen is, because it would reflect or it bounce, and the impurity causes an infection in their private parts. So this could also happen as well. So the impurity that comes from the front private part, it shouldn't be on the back private part, or something that comes from the back passage shouldn't be going to the front. Hence, when we cover when we went through or we're going to go through istinja, for example, right? In the etiquette of istinja, I mentioned from which direction we should be wiping. Like for example, for women, they should wipe from the front to back, men front to back, back to front, like that. But that's due to all hygiene. All these etiquettes that ulama have mentioned, they got to do with hygiene. So bear in mind these things as well. So don't take hygiene as something lightly. You could be causing yourself to get infections and stuff like that. So it's important that you apply the sunnah as much as possible. Like I mentioned at the start, sunnah means the best way to do things, and hence the best way to refrain from diseases, illnesses, and so on. It says you should endeavor to rid yourself of all the urine by clearing the passageway of the organ by passing the left hand in it. So here it just mentions it's known as istidara in Arabic, to free yourself from the urine drops. So for women, when they use the toilet, for example, for number one, for urine, then they just wait on the toilet for a few short moments until the impurity of the urine passes. But for males, then they should basically, you could say, squeeze the organ to take the impurities out, because in the passageway, the impurities will still be there. So when you get up and start walking, then those come out and go into your clothes. Okay, so it's important that you cleanse yourself properly. This is without causing any harm to yourself. Some people, because they start doing this, it's called like OCD. And then to the point that they start causing harm to themselves because they feel that they're not clean. Like for example, they keep doing this thing, just keep wiping themselves, and then they get sore and they start bleeding out there, right? And then they keep wiping themselves and it's causing infection and stuff. So this can happen with OCD. Generally, the sunnah method is sufficient. Right? So that's why the sunnah is there to do things 3 times. If you done it, and I mentioned, remember, in wasting water, we did it in wudu, that doing anything above the sunnah is considered israf, wasting. Yeah, so the same applies here as well. Then it says here, if you are in a desert, go out and view of people. And if you can find something to screen yourself or cover yourself, keep behind it. Do not uncover your nakedness until you reach the place where you will squat. Do not face the sun or the moon, nor have them directly behind your back. Likewise, do not face the direction of the Qibla, nor have it directly behind the back. So here they mention a few things here, and Imam Madani mentions. First thing is to make sure you uncover yourself in private. Now this goes back down to covering the aura as well. This is aura for a male, is from the bottom of the knees and to below the navel. So this should not be uncovered anywhere to anyone at any time. Okay, so this is extremely important. This includes at home wearing shorts, at football, at PE getting changed, or using the toilet. Like I mentioned, people stand up and use the urinals, then they're exposing and they're showing the private parts in public. So this should want something key and important, that when you do istinja, when you use the toilet, then make sure you're in a secluded place so no one can see you. And then he mentions here that don't face the Qibla. That's one of the adab of going to the toilet. And don't face the sun and the moon. But it's considered bad adab. If you done it unknowingly, it's no sin. This is where, if you, for example, Muslims should always plan ahead. Like we should plan our day around our salah, not the salah around the day. Similarly, when we do anything at home, for example, we're refurbishing our bathroom, then you make sure you think where the shower is going to face, which way the toilet is going to face. Same, especially in the Indo-Pak culture, it's considered bad adab to point your feet towards the Qibla, right? So because it's considered bad adab to point your feet towards the Qibla, just sitting idle and just stretching your feet towards the Qibla, then even at home, I know my parents and my relatives generally say, oh, the bed will look nice over there. Oh, we didn't put it there because the Qibla is that way. So the feet will be facing the Qibla. These small points, this is where Allah puts the nur in our heart. These are the secret things that, the adab that, the ulama have mentioned. This is where that distinguishes, a armed person to a khas, a normal person to a special person in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you take these adab into manners, our ulama of the past, they would have, if they went to the presence of a teacher and the teacher spat towards the Qibla, not in front of the Kaaba, wherever they are. Imagine I'm sitting and I spat that way. They would turn out, they leave the majlis, they wouldn't even sit with their teacher. Why? Because they consider the teacher doesn't have adab towards their Qibla. Right? So similarly, ulama would, like Imam Malik is known to, not wear shoes in Medina, or not relieve himself, not use the toilet in Medina Sharif. Right? People of ulama have done that in the past. Why? Out of adab and etiquette. And this is what adab is something that's which is lost in our community now. So this is what Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, as those who know the story of Imam Ghazali, when he studied and he studied all the different sciences of Quran and Hadith and Fiqh, then he went into seclusion, like a chilla they call it in our, he went into seclusion. Why? Because to build that spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the adab that he had. Because he knew not everything from just reading books. There's some other spiritual journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So it's not only about reading books and taking information. Because information you can get from Google. Knowledge and information is two different things. So then he mentioned that after, when you relieve yourself, do not keep your face or your back towards the Qibla. And do not use a place where people are accustomed to gather and talk. Not a place where people are accustomed to taking shade. I.e., for example, if you're on a road somewhere, you're traveling somewhere, and the people walking, they might use a tree for shade. It might be hot and there might be less trees around. So now, urinating under a tree or anything, that could cause a problem for the next person who comes there trying to rest under the tree, take shade. So another thing the ulama mentioned that is makruh to urinate or relieve yourself under trees that give fruits, for example. Right? So these things need to be kept in mind. And what is this linked into? If you think about this carefully, he's mentioning here that don't relieve yourself under trees with the shade. I.e., keep other people's haqq and their right in mind. Keep the rights of other people. In the Western culture, this mindset is that as long as my thing gets done, I don't care. Right? For example, I said to you, put the benches like this because they might fall. And the Western mindset would be like, I'll take mine as long as I've got mine done. I don't care if they fall. This is the attitude in the West. But the Muslim should be, even if I lose out, I should make sure the next person doesn't lose out. Yeah? Like for example, if we're serving food and we're serving the khidmah, the sunnah is what? You serve the people and then you eat last. You make sure that your guests, obviously the sunnah is to also sit with the guests. So for example, there's a few people, there's a gathering and I'm serving, for example. Then it shouldn't be that I'm serving and then I'm taking a chocolate from there, I'm taking a bit of roti, eating on the side. No. The other would be what? Make sure all the guests are eating. And then if there's something left from me at the end, Bismillah, I'll eat it. If not, Alhamdulillah, as long as my guests have eaten. You know, when I was small, my mom used to shout at me and, like saying that, like when you're a child, and everyone does this, especially happens, I don't know if it happens in your culture, in our culture, that when people come, let them eat, don't eat from their plate. It's half right and half wrong. It's right from one aspect that, the kids wanted to do this, start eating all of it, and then there's nothing left for the guest. In that aspect is wrong. But from the other aspect, the sunnah is that if you just, when these guests come and say, Bismillah, have some. Now, if you're not eating, how they going to feel comfortable to eat? The sunnah is that you join them. So, if, for example, Qasim, right, you have imagine some guests at your house. You say, Dad, you sit with them. When you bring the plates, imagine I'm the guest. Don't bring one plate for me. Bring one for your father as well. So now I feel comfortable that this person, normally families do what they do is, if there's 3 guests, they bring 3 plates. Bring a 4th one so one of the family members sit down and eat with them so that person feels comfortable. Right? So this is very important. I don't know how I got to there, but that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to know, so maybe someone messed up on that. But this is one of the adab of that is very important. Khidmah of other people, that's where I came from. Right? So khidmah from serving other people. So keep that in mind as well. But at the same time, you look after your guests and make sure they get the best treatment. I'll give you one thing from the guest side as well. It might have been mentioned now that trigger the topic as it's got to other. Is when you go to someone's house, don't ask for something. Right? Because why? If they don't have it, it's embarrassing. For example, if I went to Habib's house and he's brought some apples out, and I'm like, do you have a banana? Now I put him in an awkward situation. Imagine he doesn't. Now he's going to feel a bit ashamed to say, he's going to go to the kitchen first thing, he's going to be like, his wife, you don't have a banana, he wants a banana. That's so embarrassing. Naturally, a person will feel out of place. So the adab is that you don't mention it. For example, from one of my teachers, Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, when I was doing the Shamai course again, and he mentioned that, they went to someone's house and instead of sugar, because they look the same, they put salt in the tea and they mix the tea. So they're like, Bismillah, have it. So the guests start eating, which is him as well. And they start enjoying themselves. And they didn't mention it once to that person that there's salt in it. Until when that person started joining themselves, and when he had the sip, he's like, I'm so sorry there's salt in this. But out of other, for the person who's hosting them, they didn't speak and say to them, what would we say? Look at this tea, bro, it's got salt in it. Fix up what you're doing, man, you're going to kill me or something. This is the attitude that we will have. We'll start insulting the person. Just take 1-2 small sips, let the person catch up. And when he has a sip, he'll realize where they've gone wrong. Yeah? So, or if you notice, for example, it's salt. Sometimes, obviously, salt is more finer in the UK, especially. Right? So, if you can tell it's salt, then, and they say you want some sugar, and instead of embarrassing them, say, I don't want any sugar. So, really, it's salt, right? So, instead of embarrassing that person, so these are adab you should keep in mind as well. So, generally, I was talking about keeping the rights of other people in mind. That's why Imam Ghazali mentions here that don't relieve yourself under a tree. Why? Because other people might use that tree as shade or to sit under, and then obviously you've made the place impure. And then he mentions here that do not relieve yourself on hard earth. Why? That's straight logical. Why? Because it's going to reflect back. Yeah? Same with the toilet. If you stand up and urinate, it's going to reflect back. Or under a place where it's windy. Why? The wind's going to most likely blow the urine back onto your clothes. So, as to avoid splashing of the urine, for the Prophet ﷺ said, the punishment of the grave is for it. I.e., the drops of urine that go on your clothes, you can get the punishment in the grave. And there's one narration that mentioned that Prophet ﷺ walked past 2 graves, and one of the people in the grave was being punished because he wasn't careful of the urine drops on his clothes. Yeah, that was one of the reasons why he was being punished. So this is something to keep in mind, inshallah. And then it says, use your left hand to clean yourself, i.e. to do the istinja, unless it is really necessary. And do not stand, he says, do not stand unless it's necessary to stand. Sometimes, for example, you've broken your leg and you might not be able to sit in a certain scenario. Or, for example, if you've gone to a school or toilets like those where the toilet seats are more dirty than standing up. Right? Now you find yourself in such an awkward situation that it's more hygienic for you to stand up and do it. Right? Then in those scenarios you're allowed. But generally you wouldn't be allowed to stand up. So just keep that in mind, inshallah. And then he mentions here to use stones, i.e. people still do that in other places, but in modern times in our culture obviously is to use toilet paper to purify yourself, and as well as water. If you intend to use only one, then water is what you should be using. Yeah, so ideally you should use both, especially in the UK. It all depends on the culture as well. Generally on in regards to what we eat. In people who live in the desert or a climate like that, where for example they only eat dates, then when they go to the toilet, then the excretion basically is more dry, so it doesn't spread on the body. Whereas in other places where people have all kinds of food, then the excretion is not dry, hence it spreads on the exit point. So it's important to wash that as well. Inshallah, we'll stop there in regards to the adab of using the toilet. So keep this in mind that you need to reflect on the wisdom of Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala. It's not only about the fiqh aspect here, but it's more about the etiquette of using the toilet and the adab and the spiritual side of it as well, inshallah. Any questions?
Okay. First question is, as you know, in our bathrooms in the UK, the toilets and sinks are in the one place, especially in small houses. What is the best way for you to perform wudu, ablution?
Is that in terms of the dua aspect? Or, yeah? So generally, like the ulama mentioned, there's two types of toilets, for example, or bathrooms or whatever you want to call it. One is like the masjid ones, where we have the cubicle separate, and then we have the wudu area separate, the sinks separate, right? When you're in the cubicle, no one can see you. And then you come out and then you wash your hands in public. Whereas the cubicle. Now reading the dua in such kind of environment, it's outside the toilet cubicle, not the wudu area. So if you're sitting on the wudu sink, you can read the dua, because there's no impurity there. The impurity is within the cubicle. Whereas the ulama mentioned that if it's open like homes, like small toilet, sink and toilet right next to each other, then the other is to read the dua outside the bathroom before you enter. Yeah, so for small places where the impurity of the sink is literally not even a foot apart, right? Then you read the dua outside. And if it's two separate places like the masjid ones normally are, or public ones, where the toilet is separate and the sinks are separate, then it's outside the toilet cubicle, and then you're allowed to read your du'as, even for wudu, reading Bismillah and so on, is fine. But obviously, you bear in mind, you have to be wise after, you have to use your aql as well. If someone in the toilet right next to you, and you're like, sitting, and it's literally like, after the cubicle's right next to you, and you're like, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and the guy in the toilet can hear all your tilawat going on, then is obviously, that's not one of the adab of reading. So when you're reading your du'as in such public place like that, they're really whispering like this. Reading loud is not a condition, but reading is the adab of, and you should read it as well.
Second question was that at what age does the covering, the aura, become wajib or fard for young boys?
This one is like the spiritual age, and one is the halal and haram age, you would say. The halal and haram one, in terms of being a sin and so on, it will be when you hit puberty, right? For example, for males when they have a wet dream, or for females when they start a monthly cycle. That's the official night that you become a baligh, when you're responsible for your halal and haram do's and don'ts. But as we all know, it's human nature that habits have to be developed, right? So, like for example, salah becomes farz at the same time. It could be 11 years old, 12 years old, 13, everyone's different, right? But what did the Prophet say? Teach your children salah at 7 years old. And force them to read at 10 years old. He didn't say wait for force them when they're baligh. Why? Because it's a gradual process. You know, those of you who go to know about gym, you guys should know anyway. Right? So imagine I go to the gym today and I get 200 kg on the bench, I'll sit down. Do you think I'm going to be able to do it?
Yeah.
No, I'll be squashed. I can tell you that much. First thing, it won't come off the bar, off the bench. Second thing, if it does, it's going through my ribs. Right? Why? Because I haven't trained myself. You have to build yourself up to that. Right? Or what's going to happen? I'm going to tear my muscles and my ligaments, whatever you want to call them, right? That I'm going to get injured. But why? Because you have to train yourself. Same with salah. Same with covering yourself. When, you know, if someone who wears full clothes, right? When you go out wearing a t-shirt, naturally, right, you feel that you feel a bit naked. Because your level of modesty was up to here. Now revealing your arms in public, it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Ashamed.
Like you feel a bit ashamed. Like now, for example, I wear t-shirts. But that is my cut-off point. If someone told me to wear a vest and go outside, Hassan, would you wear a vest and go outside? No. Why? Because naturally you're comfortable here. So when you make yourself comfortable to shorts, for example, then the day, for example, you're wearing shorts for the last 5 years, and then all of a sudden in the night you have your experience, you're baligh. Next morning you're not going to be like, astaghfirullah, I can't wear shorts anymore. Because your body and your habit is used to, your adat is used to wearing those. Right? So now, for spiritually, even like, you know, one of my teachers used to, like, for example, when they used to clean the child when they're in the nappies, after cleaning the nappy, they used to do the wudu of the child. Why? Because when the child grew up, automatically you knew something is missing. Hence, the child automatically developed from a young age the adat of doing wudu. So even after the baby used to clean the nappy, they used to wash his arms, face, even like softly, gently. At least the child would know that after using the toilet, these 4 things need to be done. Now as the child grew up, automatically he felt that without wudu, I'm missing something. Right? So this spiritually, I would say covering your aura should be done from the get-go. Right? Even if a child is 5 years old, don't get them used to wearing shorts. Right? Get them used to wearing from the get-go, so they're not used to dressing like that. But technically, it would be when they're from baligh. And so those two things go hand in hand. Any other questions?
Page 31, sorry.
So inshallah, next text, page 31. 31 about predestination, right? And the types of knowledge. Bismillah. It says the basis of predestination, qadr. Right? Predestination means things that are already that are written for us. For example, you know, how many children we're going to have, who we're going to marry. These things are facts. You can't change certain things. Your lifespan, for example, yeah, just by eating healthy, you might have a healthier life, but your lifespan will increase. You might have a more comfortable lifestyle, i.e. that you're more healthy to do activities and walk around, but it doesn't mean that your lifespan will increase. Whatever's written for you, that's exactly what's going to happen. So your lifespan is written, right? So it mentions here that destiny, your qadr, is a secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His creation, to which no angel drew near, no prophet, a messenger has been exposed. I.e., ultimately, whatever is going to happen with anything, it's in the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the ultimate decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This for every single thing, every single person. Right? So, it's something that Allah, Him alone, in His infinite knowledge, and what I mean, every single aspect of that thing. Like for example, what I'm going to eat tomorrow, right? It's not only about, okay, just knowing the guy ate an apple or he ate a cake. No. What type it was, what was the texture, what was the color, what was the... Every single mind, to the atom, every detail, how many atoms were in that food, how many particles, how many nutrients, every single thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has predestined for us. Right? So we're going to get whatever is written for us. It says to delve into this matter the means of being forsaken by the divine as a path towards being prevented from steadfastness of faith. So beware, take every precaution not to dwell on this matter, whether in thought, reflection, or in stimulation from the devil. So here it mentions that what normally happens, for example, someone passes away. Do you think that could have been prevented? It wasn't his time to go. People say that it wasn't, don't they? He was too young to die. No, he was the perfect and the right time to die. He was meant to die then. Right? So when people say these statements, they are talking against the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What Allah has predestined for you, what Allah has written that's going to happen, now you're saying, what if this, what if that? Right? And we mentioned this hadith in the dars of Thursday in the dhikr about the importance that this is from shaitan. When you say, what if, only if it was like this. And this is so common usage. People say, like for example, someone got battered on the way to school, right? And said, only if his boys were with him. Only if he did this. Only if he went on time. This is his legs on the court slipping. Only if this, there's no ifs on that. If it's happened, it's happened. It's meant to happen. There's no way around it. If someone, was going to pass away, if they weren't going to pass away by falling down the stairs, they were going to fall down somewhere else. But death was written for that person. So there's no excuse or no way to run away from something which is predestined from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is from shaitan when we say, only if this, if that, and so on. He said, for indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has veiled the knowledge of predestination from His creation, has prohibited them from seeking it. As He most, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala high has said, He is not asked about what He does, but they will be asked about what they do. That's the bottom line. Yeah? The bottom line is, we're answerable to Allah, Allah's not answerable to us. Yeah? So, all these things about ifs and so, that's why you're saying, you're kind of challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? You question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge and wisdom. So, for us, if it happened, labbaik. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. If it doesn't happen the way we want it, labbaik. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Then he goes on to mention, hence, if someone asks, why did he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do such and such? Then he has indeed rejected the command of the Quran and has disbelieved. But this here, disbelief will be on this level of kufr. Because it depends really on how you are questioning judge. Right? For example, a Muslim could be just generally out of lack of knowledge is finding out why does Allah punish people for. And then we have a disbeliever asking, ridiculing and testing and saying, what kind of God is he? Trying to insult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a difference in the asking as well. Right? But generally, these statements are of, satanic statements, you could say. And it happens a lot, when people pass away and women often, they wail and our Zuban said, Bena karne. You right? And they say that and what is the statement they say? Why did this happen? We had one son, and why did our one son be taken away from us? All these questions. Even though they're sad, even though you're upset, it doesn't mean that we challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who gave you, He took it away. Hence we say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. From Allah, we come unto Allah, we return. Simple. So when He blessed you with a child, you do His shukr. When He takes His gift away from you, you do shukr. You do sad, but you don't question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree and His wisdom. He said this portion of belief then is what is needed by one whose heart is illuminated and who is amongst the saints of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is indeed the level of those firmly rooted in knowledge. Why? Because people of ilm, they will never make these statements. Only people who don't have knowledge, they're going to make these statements, right? So it's important, first thing, that we seek ilm. And second, that we know that he mentions here, the author, that this person who has hearts are illuminated, i.e. they have nur in their heart. Whatever happens, they are content with the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are happy with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them or taken away from them, tested them with, and whatever scenario Allah has placed them in, a true believer will be content in all scenarios. And he should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ever, deprive us of anything. If you take something away from us, it's just that we don't see the wisdom behind it. It's like, imagine a child trying to put his hand in the fire. What would the parents say? My son, don't go there, don't go there. Would they do that? They say, get away from there. Don't you dare go over there. The child reaches the hand just to touch the fire in the cooker or something. What do? Put your hand down. Even though it might hurt the child, but what's in the parent's mind?
Protection.
I'm protecting them from a bigger harm. So the child knows that mom and dad wouldn't really force me to stop. They must be forcing me to stop out of a bigger hazard that I don't understand. Hence, if you don't pay heed, you don't take the lesson, and you don't use your akal and take the lesson, mom and dad walk out of you, you're going to touch it, start crying. Right? That's what children do, right? When they don't listen the first time. When they're told not to go somewhere. This is the same for adults. When Allah said, don't do something, and we think, why did this happen to us? Now when we start questioning Allah, what happens? You end up getting depressed, get anxiety, depression, which leads to bigger problems. Now, when Allah said, just don't worry about it, just leave it, it's gone, done, dusted. Then you leave it, it's gone, done, and dusted. But when you try to, Allah said, don't go there, and you still go there, then you're asking for it. It's like that child who still touches that fire or something hot, and then it gets burnt, and then he complains that why was the thing hot? Right? That's our state. So you just wait a few minutes, inshallah. Where are you going? You're not? Just wait a few minutes, inshallah. You finish after this section, you can go, inshallah. So then it mentions here, inshallah, we'll continue from here next lesson. We go on to a bit of fiqh before we leave, inshallah. We'll start the paragraph and it's going to be a bit long. So we'll start from page number 32, second paragraph. Hence, if someone asks why did I know? 52, inshallah, we've got to that. If you turn to 52, inshallah, we'll do a few minutes.
52, 53, I think it was at the end of 53. We were talking about the wiping of the hoofs.
And did we stop them?
Yeah, we were near the end of this section. What would invalidate them?
Page 52, 54, sorry.
G.
Bismillah. So, last lesson I know we finished on wiping the khuffayn and the sunnah method, which was from the toes, fingers spread open, and up towards the shin. The next page, it mentioned those things which will invalidate the khuffayn or wiping of the khuf. We said, generally, anything that breaks wudu will cancel out the wiping of the leather socks. So if you wipe over leather socks and then you had a nosebleed, the wiping is cancelled out. Here is not referring to when you have to wash your feet again. It's not referring to that. It means when the wiping is cancelled out. Right? So he says anything that breaks your wudu, it cancels out the wiping of the leather socks as well. That's the first thing. Then second thing, it means taking even one pair off. Now when you take the khuffayn off, Then the wiping is cancelled, you have to wash your feet again. Right? Because you've removed your leather socks completely. And the third being, this is page number 54, Gulami, top left. Then the third, it says the expiration of the time period. So if you are a traveler, you have 72 hours to keep the leather socks on. And if you're a local person and just in your local area, it's 24 hours. So the 24 hours start from the moment you break your wudu. Right? For example, I done wudu at 12 in the afternoon, 12 p.m. I done wudu and I put my leather socks on. At 3 o'clock my wudu broke. The 24 hours started at 3 o'clock, not at 12 o'clock. Because first I had wudu anyway. So the Khuffayn start playing their role at 3 o'clock. So next day, soon as it hits 2:59, that was the end time. Soon as it hits 3, the time's up. You need to remove them, wash your feet again, and then you can wear them again. And the next he mentioned that most of the foot leaving the khuf. So as we know, like for example, the foot has, or the sock has 2 parts. Just say this is the sock, it has L shape, right? So if this is your sock, then this part where your foot goes into up to your ankle, that would be what's considered. So imagine you're running and your leather sock was a bit loose and it came off and your foot went at the top and the sock was just hanging about. Your foot has come out, the main foot part. Hence, it's considered your foot's out. But if you just move up to here, but most of the inner section is still in, the bottom section, your foot is still in there, then it's considered you're still wearing it. But if most of your foot came out like this, and now most of your foot is in the top section of it, above the ankle, then it's considered you've taken your khuffayn off. So that's what it refers to, that when a person has removed the khuf, or most of the foot leaving of the khuf. And then as a side note they've given, it is invalid to wipe the turban or a cap that you're wearing, or a face covering like a niqab, or gloves you're wearing. So you can't do wudu with wearing gloves. Right? So that's the main thing that they've covered. If you have any questions regarding this, inshallah, do let me know. We can do the question in the next lesson as well. So the next part is wiping on casts, or if you hurt yourself, you've got a bandage on or a plaster on, what's the scenario with that? So Bismillah ar-Rahman. It says, if one has a broken or wounded limb, he may wipe its cast, bandage, or dressing for as long as the excuse remains, even if it were placed on the limb while the person was in a state of major or minor impurity. This is straightforward. For example, you gone to the park to play football. You fell down, you broke your arm, and now you go to L&D hospital, they need to put a cast on. You're not going to say, give me 1 minute, let me do my wudu first. Yeah, then put the bandage on, and then I'll go my wudu. No. You're going to let them do what they need to do. They put a bandage on, they put a cast on, and then when it's wudu time, you just wipe over that limb. You just wipe over the bandage. That's the same with if you hurt yourself. For example, you're running, you fall down, you graze your hands or your knees, then obviously now you've got a plaster on there. What would you do at time of wudu? You won't remove the plaster from your hand. You keep the plaster on and you do your wudu. Yeah? So invest in some waterproof plasters, because the normal ones, they fall off and it starts bleeding, the blood is flowing, and then you're back to stage 1. So generally, it'd be wise if you buy plasters from Muslims with the facilities we have, always buy the waterproof ones, so at least you can do wudu properly, and plus the wound won't get infected by constant water going in the wound. But obviously, you should replace the dressings appropriately as well. Don't think that the wound's there for 2 weeks, you're wearing the same rotten plaster. That could cause the infection as well. So you would know probably better how often you should replace those. Maybe every 2 days. So every 2 days you should replace those, or 1 day, depending on what type of injury you have. But don't keep the dressing on for so long. Obviously, certain ones, it requires a specialist, a doctor, to put the dressing on. This reminds me of my grandma. She went to she was cutting her apple, I think, Madani, and the knife was sharp, right? And she actually slipped and she cut her finger, thumb. So when she went to the doctor's hospital and they stitched her and all that, they put a dressing around. So they told her, after 1 week, go to your doctor will change it. She went to the doctor didn't know how to even tie the bandage. She said, Auntie, can you do it yourself? So my grandma, she had to tie her own. So sometimes doctors don't know as well, so you need to know some first aid skills yourself as well. So it's important that we know. So sometimes doctors these days, they've been Googling it as well, so that happens. Yeah, so we should learn some, and this is for our benefit, people generally as Muslims, we should, even though you're not going to do for a certificate or anything, we should do some form of first aid, learning of first aid, so you can save anyone's life at any given time. So it's important to do that, generally know some life-saving skills. So it's beneficial for and someone you might find in a hard, awkward situation. Like I've seen in the news, this was in these floods in Pakistan, right? And these brothers, they were young lads, they were by the river bank and they were just chilling, hanging around, and finally they started to get drowned. And there was a lady, she did first aid, and she was like a doctor. So she pulled him out, and then literally everyone was considered dead, and everyone, his family members were crying and stuff. And then she basically brought him back to life, you could say. In like 1 minute, she was pumping his chest, breathing in his mouth, and then all of a sudden he just burst into life. Yeah, so but if it was a person who doesn't know, they say, oh, he passed away, they leave him, and he will actually pass away then. So it's important to learn basic first aid skills as well. Then it mentions here that if you have a bandage and all that, then you can wipe over those. It's not conditioned to wipe the entire cast, although it is according to the weaker opinion. So imagine you have a cast on, you don't need to do the whole thing. As long as you wipe the majority of it, the way we wipe our khuffayn and we wipe our hair, for example, just wiping majority of it will do the job. But it's best to wipe as much as you can. And the next point I mentioned is, sometimes you have a bandage on, you might have some gaps where you can see skin in the middle. You don't wipe the bandage, you wash the skin and wipe the bandage, no. If there's some gaps in the middle, Bismillah, you just wipe over all of it. You don't need to wash the middle parts and so on. And the last part is regarding for example, if we cut our finger and we had a plaster on it, sometimes the plaster just falls off, doesn't it? So you might find it's having two scenarios. So for example, you washed your hands, you did a wudu, you had a plaster on your arm. Wudu's done, you put your clothes on, the plaster fell off. If you notice the wound has healed, now you need to go back and wash that part. Because you might have the plaster on for 2 days, for example, right? And the bleeding has stopped and it's healed up. So, but you wouldn't know that until you remove the plaster. But in your mind, it was that it's still damaged. It's only been 2 days, it might not be healed. So now the plaster has fallen off, you realize it's healed. Then you have to go and wash that part and complete your wudu. But if it falls off after you did a wudu, the plaster falls off, you realize that it's still, the injury is still there, the cut or the wound is still there. You just get fresh plaster and put it on. If nothing happens to your wudu, it's fine. So that is scenario based as well. So like I mentioned, that if you go to the doctor and they need to replace the dressing, they might open it and say, hang on a minute, you know what, your hand's fine. You don't need to replace the dressing, it's fine. Or they might say, actually, we're going to continue and put the fresh dressing on. If they put the fresh dressing on, you don't need to wipe over that. But if they say, actually, imagine you did wudu, you wipe over it, you went to doctor's appointment, they removed the dressing and they realized it's healed, it's fine. Now to complete your wudu, you'll have to go wash that part. Yeah? So that's something to keep in mind as well. And I just mentioned here that if you replaced it generally, like imagine you had a damage, you had a cut, you just want to replace the plaster, you don't need to wipe over the fresh plaster, you just replace it without ice. And wiping over the bandages and casts, it doesn't really need an intention. Same like the khuffayn, wiping over the leather socks, you don't need the intention that you're wiping over leather socks. That is not part of the conditions. And inshallah, we'll stop here. The next chapter will start from next lesson. Any questions? And then we can go inshallah.
Sometimes if you broken your arm and you put a cast on, back in the day I remember this, when it used to be like a white cast, only a white cast. Nowadays the material is a lot different. It's a variation inside the cast now. So what would you do if you broken your arm and you had a cast, but some casts do not permit you to do a massa over it or wipe over it? What do you do then in that situation?
So if you have wearing a cast or any item or plaster or white bandage, dressing, any dressing, like sometimes you have dressings which you can't, and the condition is that you can't get it wet at all, right? It might cause an infection, especially if you have burns or something like that, right? Then
skin graft.
Those you leave it altogether. That is you're fully excused from that part, right? So you'll be fully excused. And you might find yourself in a scenario, for example, you didn't bandage it, but you grazed your arm now. The graze is still there, so if you wash it, it causes you injury, it hurt. So in that case, you miss the part out as well. You don't need to wipe over it in that scenario as well. But as you mentioned about the cast thing, just as I thought you were going to say something slightly different, which was when children start drawing on it, or these days you have options to have pictures and colors and different styles. So as Muslims, pick the right cast as well. You don't want to be doing salah and you've got SpongeBob SquarePants on your arm, right? Or something like that. So keep that in mind as well, or any drawings or anything you want to do on it.
What if someone's like in a desert and there's no water near them and they have like a big pot, and when they try to do like they can't really put the dirt on their body to get.
So that would be the same thing you can miss it out. Yeah, so he's asking that if you have to do tayammum, for example, but you didn't have anything to cover your injury, then hence, if you put the soil on it or the sand on it, it can cause further injuries, especially the grains of sand might go inside and infection. Then you miss that part altogether as well. Yeah, but you continue with the rest, but you miss that part. Anything, Islamically, anything that will cause your injury to increase or your illness to get worse, then Islam will excuse you on that, basically, right? So that's like a general rule in most fiqh rulings that will apply. So anything you think that, but obviously that'll have to be a legit. If you're not sure, ask the alim, ask a Muslim doctor in some cases. For example, fasting in the month of Ramadan. Some people can manage it with diabetes. Some people can't manage with diabetes, for example. So that'll be a Muslim doctor have to give you advice, and then you take. It has to be a practicing one. You can't be the guy who never prays his salah. He doesn't fast himself. Like, yeah, bro, don't fast, bro. Don't fast. No, it has to be a person who has the intellect that how important fasting is, how important for them salah is, and then he'll give you the ruling from a medical point of view, bearing the religious aspect in mind as well. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives all the tawfiq to understand the Quran. Allahumma rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhaban nar. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala habibihi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.